Hello, your humble host and narrator, JT Wheatley here, and welcome you back for another History of Comic Books podcast. This time, the history of Batman. Like all comic book creations, Batman began with his creators, who had not one, despite what people think, but two, Bob Kane and Bill Finger. Bob Kane was born Bob Kane, K-A-H-N, on October 24th, 1915, remember that date, the son of an engraver and printer at the New York Daily News, who encouraged his own art career. As he grew older, Kahn became known as a womanizer, going on double dates with Will Eisner, his classmate at DeWitt High School, a reputation he enjoyed. He would later claim to a brief romance with Marilyn Monroe. He went to the commercial art studio and changed his name to Bob Kane at this point to make it more mainstream, as many other comic book creators would do. He started out working at his uncle's garment factory before moving on to the Max Fleischer studio, then working on Jerry Iger's Wow magazine, and later Eisner and Iger's studio. During this time, he would produce such strips as Peter Pulp for Fiction House's Jumbo Comics, along with Ginger Snaps for More Fun Comics, Oscar the Gumshoe for Detective Comics, and Professor Doolittle for Adventure Comics, for which he also produced Rusty and His Pals. During this time, he had a fateful meeting at a cocktail party with an old alumni from DeWitt, Bill Finger. Bill Finger was born Milton Finger on February 8, 1914, in Denver, Colorado, to a Jewish family who had immigrated from Austria. They would later move to the Bronx in New York City, where his father started up a tailor shop only to have to shut it down during the Great Depression. An aspiring writer, when he met Bob Kane, he was already married with a young son looking for work. Kane needed a writer for his new studio he was about to start up, and thus he was recruited. Soon they would have more work than they would know what to do with. In late 1938, spurred by Superman's success, national editor Vin Sullivan was looking for a new superhero for their Detective Comics series, and Bob Kane and Bill Finger were ready to step in. However, this is where things get a bit murky. According to Kane, he first drew the concept of Batman back in 1934, inspired by the sketch of a man in a glider by Leonardo da Vinci, originally calling him Birdman. However, Finger was a fan of the pulp character The Shadow and felt the Bat would be better. He also changed the original red coloring of the character to gray. Plus, there were a number of pulp characters who, with Batman-like names already. Kane claimed influence, like many other comic creators, of the character Zorro, and the parallels can be seen, from having a secret lair, dressing in black, and an alter ego of a rich playboy. Kane also cited the movie The Bat Whisperers of 1930, about a criminal who calls himself the Bat and uses a bat-like symbol to scare his victims. Together, they put together a 6-page strip, which Kane took to Sullivan. He also personally signed a long-term deal with Sullivan, which he kept secret from Finger, something he would soon make a habit of. In Detective Comics number 27 of May of 1939, Batman made his debut on the cover, with a classic image of Batman swinging through the city with a criminal in tow, invoking the Shadow. In the story, the case of the criminal syndicate, he battles an evil lab assistant, and doing something that would change in the near future, kills him. Kane also contracted Gardner Fox to help with the writing over Bill Finger, who was notoriously late with his scripts. Fox added the Gothic flair to the series, thus letting Gotham City finally live up to his own name. Ghostwriters were not uncommon at the time, and artists for that matter. It wasn't long before Joe Shuster had a whole studio of ghost artists working for him on Superman. By Detective Comics number 30, Batman had lost both the hyphen and the quotes around his name, along with acquiring his trademark utility belt. He also suffered a gunshot wound from a criminal, showing this was the polar opposite of his counterpart in Action Comics Superman, as bullets could hurt and even kill him. Despite his popularity, he still shared Detective Comics with other characters like Slam Bradley. In Detective Comics number 33, Bill Finger gave his origin, telling how a young Bruce Wayne witnessed his parents gunned down, leading him to making a vow to fight crime. In the comic, a bat is seen silhouetted against the moon, appearing very much like the bat symbol. It was at this point that the writing style of Finger and Fox began to become apparent, as Finger was more grounded, while Gardner Fox was much more grandiose. In Detective Comics number 36, a 17-year-old named Jerry Robinson took over the art from Bob Kane, who got the job when Bob Kane noticed him at a New Jersey tennis club in late 1939, advertising his own art on his jacket. This issue also petitioned something that would soon disappear from the character, with Batman grinning and even cracking jokes. However, one long-lasting thing was the appearance of Hugo Strange, an evil psychiatrist originally designed to be Batman's chief villain, a moral oddity to his Sherlock Holmes, if you would say. By issue number 38, Batman at least got his own Watson with the introduction of Robin, which depicts an 8-year-old trapeze artist whose parents were murdered by the crime boss Zuko. After capturing him, he becomes Batman's sidekick, Robin the Boy Wonder, with a red, green, yellow outfit, and a name inspired by Robin Hood from the classic film The Adventures of Robin Hood, which Jerry Robinson cites as one of his favorite movies of all time. Mine too, Mr. Robinson. Pretty soon, sidekicks became super popular, excuse the pun, in comic books, with Captain America getting Bucky and the original Human Torch getting Toro. Unfortunately, an infamous typo occurred, which would come to haunt them later, when it was described that instead of Robin was Batman's ally, it was anally. Something that would be used by his critics to imply a gay relationship between Batman and Robin, even though the intention was always a father-son, mentor-sidekick one. By the spring of 1940, Batman got his own series, featuring the first appearances of Catwoman, called The Cat at first, and the Joker. The Joker was originally inspired by the look of the Joker in a deck of cards and Conrad Veicht's character in the classic 1928 silent film The Man Who Laughs, about a man whose face is disfigured with a permanent grin. The visuals were hammered out by Bob Kane and Jerry Robinson, with Bill Fingers writing. He would make him into a remorseless serial killer who used his Joker gas on his victims. This MO will remain until April of 1942, but wouldn't return until the 1970s, when he eventually became his chief villain in the 1980s. As for the violence in the Batman comics, was about to be severely restricted. In that same Batman #1, Batman was depicted in the comic not only using guns, but having them mounted on his Batplane to mow down criminals. This went against National's own personal edict that heroes don't kill, and pretty soon Batman was not only killing and dropping the use of guns, but became an honorary cop in Batman #7 in the fall of 1941. At the same time, many of Batman's iconic features started to appear, with Gotham City finally being named in early of 1941, and getting his own Batmobile, while the Bat Signal made its first appearance in 1942. Arkham Hospital was also appeared, but wouldn't be called Arkham Asylum until Batman #258 in October of 1974. Plus, Alfred finally made his appearance in spring of 1943 as well, and to counter the homosexual rumors about him and Robin, Batman got a steady girlfriend in Linda Page from 1941 to 45, before moving on to photographer Vicky Vale. Pretty soon, many more iconic villains started to appear, from Two-Face, Clayface, Penguin, the Riddler, and the Mad Hatter. All this happened during World War II, in which the covers of Batman featured him in patriotic poses, but inside each comic, he still just fought crime like normal superheroes. Also, in 1943, Bob Kane got another lucrative venture with the Batman and Robin newspaper strip that ran for 3 years. All in all, Batman was an enormous success, with comics selling 3 million per month. On July 16, 1943, the Batman got to jump into live action with his movie serial debuted, featuring 15 episodes. And in line with the patriotic fever of World War II, Batman and Robin would now be U.S. government agents working for Captain Arnold and fighting the Japanese, like the villainous Dr. Tito Daka. Sadly, the racist depictions in this serial have not aged well. Nevertheless, the show ended up being a huge success and influenced the comic, introducing the Batcave and even having Jerry Robinson alter Alfred's appearance to look more like the actor William Alston. Of course, the second serial was released in 1949, but to disappointing numbers. On February 28, 1945, Batman and Robin made the jump to radio, guest starring on the immensely popular Superman radio show. In 1946, behind the scenes, Kane arranged for Batman to be solely credited to him by National in a deal to ensure he didn't side with Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster in their lawsuit over the ownership of Superman. As leverage, Kane claimed he wasn't 18 at the time when he signed the contract, and since birth records were spotty at the best, especially for children of immigrant families, publisher Jack Leibowitz relented, signing a deal promising royalties and a guaranteed page rates in exchange for ownership of Batman. Of course, Bill Finger, who was equally instrumental in creating the character, was shut out completely. However, all was not rosy in the Batman universe, as soon he would be targeted by Frederick Wertham, the author of The Seduction of Innocence, the 1954 book that blamed comic books for juvenile crime, though a cursory glance of his research showed that it wasn't even backed by any scientific studies. The one thing Wertham could point out was that most juvenile delinquents read comics, but most kids read comics in general. The same thing could be said about chewing gum, movies, and watching baseball in the 1950s. Nevertheless, Batman was still a target of over and what he believed an inappropriate relationship between him and Robin. It didn't help that the comics gave him some ammo. In Batman number 84 of June of 1954, Bruce Wayne and Dick Grayson woke up in bed together. In The World's Finest number 59, July of 1952, they were tanning naked, and in Batman number 13, October, November of 1942, they were off on a rowboat together in the river, alone. Both the current and future writers dispute the notion that Batman and Robin had anything but a father-son relationship, though Grant Morrison argued that the imagery does still matter. They may not have been written gay, but it was provided opening for readers to interpret what they wanted. Of course, with the CCA implemented in 1954, both Batman and his villains were made tamier and more cartoonish. By World's Finest number 30, September of 1947, a perfect example of this was shown when the giant penny trophy appeared, and it was added to the Batcave, along with other cartoonish trophies like the T-Rex to be added later. Under editor Jack Schiff, the plots became more sci-fi, and his look more modest, with shorter ears, brighter blue coloring, and a waist-length cape. He was essentially a benign scoutmaster at this point, according to writer Denny O'Neil. They also expanded the Bat family, including introducing Aunt Agatha in Batman number 89 of February of 1955, along with new allies in Detective Comics number 215 from around the world, Knight and Squire from England, Ranger from Australia, Legionary from Italy, Groucho from South America, and the Musketeer, of course, from France. Also, in Batman number 92 of June of 1955, Ace the Bat-Hound was introduced. Then Batwoman joined the comics in Detective Comics number 233 of July of 1956, as heiress Kathy Kane showed up in a bright yellow outfit, not only to fight crime but to hook up with Batman. Of course, Batman resisted her advances, but still didn't help the accusation that he was gay, but it could have just been because she just came on too strong. By 1964, the sales for Batman comics were dwindling, so Donenfeld ordered writer Julie Schwartz and artist Carmen Infantino to fix them. In Detective Comics number 327 of May of 1964, the comic was made more realistic and sinister. With the drastic move of killing off Alfred, don't worry, like most comic book characters, he'll be back, along with the more permanent change of an added yellow oval under the bat symbol. During all this, National was still obligated to a certain number of pages from Bob Kane, who had ghost artist Sheldon Madoff produce them. However, to Arkham, Bill Finger began to be directly credited as the writer of Batman. As part of this move, the Penguin appeared in the comic book in 1963, and then the Riddler in 1965, as the stories took on a more James Bond feel. In 1964, the fandom started to make itself known with Batmania, a fanzine created by Missouri firefighter Bill Go White that became so popular it received a mention in Batman number 139 in January of 1965. All this time, sales rose by 69%. However, this new direction was about to change when a certain TV show premiered in 1966. On January 12, 1966, the Batman TV show premiered on ABC. The pilot was crafted by Lorenzo Sample Jr., based on the story in Batman number 171, March of 1965, The Remarkable Race of the Riddler, into Hey Diddle Riddle / Smack in the Middle, produced by William Dozier, who had a distaste for comic books for an eye for pop culture. Originally, he conceived it as a 1-hour show, but later decided to make it 2 half-hour shows, with the first ending in his trademark cliffhanger. The characters of Chief O'Hare and Aunt Harriet were added to the show, and then Adam West and Burt Ward were cast in the roles of Batman and Robin. West brought a stoic performance to Batman Bruce Wayne, who only became excited when solving crimes, while Burt Ward literally bounced in every scene. Of course, the campy Biff, Pow were added to the cartoonish fights. When the pilot premiered, it was an instant sensation, with 60% of American TV sets watching it, while National would go on to make $70 million in merchandise in the first year alone. The theme by Neil Hafty received multiple covers, and celebrities came out of the woodwork to guest star. Most notably were the actors who played the villains, from the great character actor Burgess Meredith as the Penguin to the Latin leather Cesar Romero as the Joker, who famously refused to shave his mustache, so it was just painted over with white makeup. More obvious today with the recent HD Blu-ray transfers of the show. With such a popular show, it was bound to influence the comics, as in Batman number 179 imitated the style of the show, but ended up selling 980,000 copies, outselling Superman for the first time ever. The character was now so popular he started gracing the covers of other comics, from the JLA number 43 in March of 1966 to World's Finest number 166 in September of 1966. He even started making numerous cameos, including the adventures of Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. By Detective Comics number 353 in July of 1966, Robin started uttering Burt Ray's classic catchphrase, "Holy whatever, Batman," and then in a truly meta moment in Batman number 183 of August of 1966, its cover showed Batman staying home instead of fighting crime so he could watch his own TV show. All this peaked with the Batman movie, which premiered on July 30th of 1966, making a decent $1.7 million at the box office, $13 million today, which wasn't a bad haul for what was essentially a TV movie. However, the biggest, most longest-lasting effect it had in the comics was the invention of Batgirl. As fast as Batman the TV show succeeded, it was fading just as fast. Thus, William Dozier suggested the comics created a young female character to attract new fans, even suggesting she be Commissioner Gordon's daughter. Thus, in Detective Comics number 359 by Gardner Fox and Carmen Infantino, Batgirl / Commissioner Barbara Gordon made her debut and would later appear in the TV show played by Yvonne Craig. Nevertheless, this wasn't enough to save the show, which aired its last episode in March of 1968. Amazingly, after just over 2 years, it had made 120 episodes and a movie, and has since gained more fondness with fans. While not the true Batman many identify, it is now recognized as a fun show that, for a brief period, was one of the biggest popular events in history. Don't be surprised if you attend a comic book convention with a parade, and you see an Adam West Batman running around with a fake bomb, the classic scene from the movie. While Kane hated the show, it did allow him to cut a better deal with National for money. However, it was at this time that Bill Finger finally spoke up about his own involvement with Batman, which led to Kane to viciously blast him in the media, calling him a liar. Finger, never wanting to start a fight even when he had good cause, backed down and would later die at the age of 59 on January 18, 1974. It will be decades later before he would finally be acknowledged fully for his work on Batman. With the show gone, Batman's sales quickly declined as a distaste for the show affected them as they maintained the style of it, all except one. At The Brave and the Bold, a team-up comic book in which Batman was paired with various DC superheroes, editor Murray Bolinoff hired Bob Haney and artist Neil Adams to take over the series. It was considered to be one of the minor books of DC, but Adams had a different idea. When he drew Batman, he made him darker, more Bat-like. And even when Haney wrote a scene that was set in daytime, Adams would always set it at night. Of course, it helped that Neil Adams was a brilliant artist whose realistic style set a new standard for the genre. But it wasn't long before fans noticed, and Brave and the Bold was selling better than the Detective Comics. Meanwhile, in Batman number 217 of December of 1969, another significant event happened when Bruce Wayne finally sent Dick Grayson off to college. Man, they age slow in comic books. To Hudson University, and moved out of Wayne Manor himself to downtown Gotham City. He decided to merge his roles as Batman and Bruce Wayne, as Wayne would now use his foundation to help victims of violent crime while Batman fought the criminal establishment. Then, on January of 1970, Denny O'Neil and Neil Adams were brought onto the main Batman comics and proceeded to emphasize his detective skills while making it more obsessive and scary, beginning with Detective Comics number 395 and the classic story The Secret of the Waiting Graves. In Detective Comics number 400 of June of 1970, Man-Bat was introduced, adding a horror element to his villains. And then in Detective Comics number 405 of December of 1970, the League of Assassins was introduced, hinting at another classic villain, Ra's al Ghul, who would finally fully appear in Batman number 232 in June of 1971. Soon, in Batman's number 242 to 245, Batman fought Al Ghul in a globe-trotting adventure. His other villains got a makeover as well, as Two-Face was made to have a split personality in Batman number 234 in July of 1970. And then the Clown Prince of Crime himself, the Joker, returned in all his glory in Batman number 251 of September of 1973. Once again, the homicidal maniac he was originally conceived. However, O'Neil added a new element that made him a true villain of Batman, as he was now completely insane and unpredictable. Thus, the world's greatest detectives couldn't even figure him out. It was this that finally made Joker Batman's true opposite and chief villain. In Batman number 258 of October of 1974, Arkham Asylum was finally reintroduced. And then, to further expand the mythos, a new character was created with ties back to his origin, Leslie Thompson, the social worker who found a young Bruce Wayne when his parents were murdered in Crime Alley. Still living in the area, it was revealed in Detective Comics number 457 of March of 1976 by artist Dick Giordano that Batman still visits the place of his parents' death where they were killed every year with Miss Thompson on the anniversary, as a reminder of why he does what he does. Meanwhile, DC continued to find ways to expand the merchandising of Batman and his various characters, with Superman Friends, the TV show, appearing. A campier, more kid-friendly approach to the characters, it ran off and on from 1973 to 86, and nevertheless led to an explosion of merchandise sales, while reaching far more kids than their comics did. This led to the New Adventures of Batman, which ran from February 12th to May of 28th of 1977 for 16 episodes, in which Adam West and Burt Ward provided the voices, along with Batmite, who was first appeared in Detective Comics number 267 of May of 1959, a well-meaning imp from the dimension Ergo, who considered himself Batman's biggest fan. The actors also briefly reappeared in their live-action form in the Legends of Superheroes special on the NBC, which aired of January 18th and the 25th of 1979, keeping up their sunny persona. Back at the comics, Steve Englehart, Terry Austin, and Marshall Lawyers had a successful run of Detective Comics, number 469 to 475 in May of 1979, which not only introduced his new regular girlfriend, Silver St. John, but also one of his most iconic stories with the laughing fish. And the Joker poisons Gotham City's water supply with his Joker gas, creating smiling fish. Then, in classic Joker fashion, he tries to have the fish patented, only to go after the patent office when he can't because, well, he's the Joker. Despite all this, Detective Comics was nearly canceled after issue number 480, till in 1979, new editor Paul Levitz brought on Len Wein to help revamp the series. His most notable addition was the creation of Lucius Fox, the executive who Bruce Wayne would put in charge of running Wayne Enterprises on a daily basis, thus giving him time to be a vigilante. He not only served the job of explaining how Bruce Wayne was able to be Batman and run a billion-dollar company, but also introduced the first regular black character to the Batman universe. That realistic move aside, Batman still fought more colorful villains like Crazy Quilt and Kite Man, while working with Paul Levitz to create the Batman Bible, which set up the continuity for the character. Meanwhile, Robin finally rebelled from his former superhero team and formed his own with the new Teen Titans on November of 1980 by Marv Wolfman and George Perez, with fellow young heroes Wonder Girl, Kid Flash, Cyborg, Starfire, and the Raven. Soon, Dick Grayson would dump the Robin persona altogether, becoming Nightwing in Tales of the Teen Titans number 44 in July of 1984. With his young ward gone, Batman became moodier, and thus a new Robin was created with Jason Todd, first appearing in Batman number 357 of March 1983, before taking up the mantle in Batman number 368 in February of 1984. Strangely, his origin was nearly exactly the same as Dick Grayson's, down to being from a circus family, at least until a certain crisis in DC comic books happened, but more on that later. Nevertheless, Batman still needed a breakthrough, and that finally came in 1986 with Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns. Having been lured away from Marvel to DC with the promise to produce his Ronin miniseries in 1984, he then turned his attention to DC's iconic character. He originally pitched up a revamp years ago with Steve Gerber, along with a Superman and Wonder Woman revamp as well, which were to be titled The Man of Steel and Amazon, respectively. While they were turned down at first, he finally got a chance to do his Batman for Adults series, creating what he called the God of Vengeance, the Dark Knight, who returns to the cowl in his 50s after being retired for 20 years. One of the things that made the story so iconic is that the story is actually set in 1986, with the implication that this is the Batman from the 1960s version. This Batman was a vigilante fighting the establishment, complete with a new Robin, Carrie Kelly. The run was so popular it made the mainstream media like the Rolling Stone and LA Herald Examiner, and when it released, was on the New York Times bestseller list for 38 weeks. To date, it is considered one of the best, if not the best, Batman stories ever, and certainly one of the most iconic. However, Frank Miller wasn't through with Batman just yet. After the Crisis of Infinite Earths, while revamping the whole DC's comic line, every character was due a reboot, so Frank Miller teamed with his Daredevil Born-Again artist David Mazzulli on Batman Year One and Batman number 404 to 407 of February and May of 1987. Retelling not only the origin of Batman, but also Commissioner Gordon, who comes to Gotham City as a young police lieutenant as they both team up to fight crime and corruption. The story is a contrast to present day, as Gordon initially hates Batman, who he sees as a dangerous vigilante, until the corruption of the Gotham PD makes him realize his need. Plus, Batman is shown making mistakes and near misses, slowly learning to become a superhero, while setting his sights on the corrupt establishment. Nearly universally acclaimed, the one negative is that Catwoman Selina Kyle is reimagined as a former prostitute dominatrix. As great as the story was, it was not something that would sit well with the fans, and like all things, will eventually see a retcon. Meanwhile, the Joker got his own origin reboot, or just an origin in general, with Batman the Killing Joke of March of 1988 by Alan Moore and Brian Boland. Switching back and forth between the past, where a person who we believe to be the Joker gets caught up in a criminal scheme when his pregnant wife dies, while in the present, the Joker hatches a plan to make Commissioner Gordon insane. To do so, he invades an apartment, shooting and paralyzing his daughter Barbara Gordon, who he then undresses and takes naked pictures of her. Then, a captured Gordon is taken to a sadistic funhouse where he is forced to view the said pictures, only to be rescued by Batman. Despite these horrors, Gordon gets one of his most truly iconic moments when he tells Batman to bring in the Joker by the book. Batman eventually captures him, but in their final confrontation, it is left up to the readers to decide if the Dark Knight finally kills him. However, this is taken away from the readers when this story, originally conceived in an Elseworld comic, when it was first incorporated to the regular canon because it was considered so good, with Batgirl now becoming the wheelchair-bound hero Oracle. All of this, along with Meryl's run on Daredevil and Alan Moore's Watchmen, led to the grim and gritty era of comics, with multiple stories and violent storytelling that eventually went overboard. Like many imitations of the great works, they missed the point of the fact that Dark Knight Returns and The Watchmen appealed to fans because they were mature and intelligent, not just because they were violent. Even Batman got up in this craze with Batman the Cult, a 1988 miniseries by Jim Starlin and Bernie Wrightson, in which Batman is kidnapped, tortured, and brainwashed by a sadistic cult. The Crisis of Infinite Earths by DC also brought along a revamp for Jason Todd as well, who in Batman number 408 of June of 1987, writer Max Allan Collins of Dick Tracy fame reimagined him now as a kid that Batman found trying to steal his wheels off the Batmobile. Now a sullen, almost vengeful teen, in Batman number 424, is strongly implied he pushed a rapist off the building to his death. Fans hated this new Robin, which led to the Death in the Family storyline in Batman number 427 of November of 1988, in which fans were given the choice to vote whether Jason Todd lived or died by the Joker's hands. Ultimately, the fans voted for his death, and he died in Batman number 428. Of interesting note, this does line up with The Dark Knight Returns, who stated that Robin did die. However, the biggest news for Batman came when he finally made his jump to the big screen. While Batman had starred in movie serials and even an overblown TV movie from the Batman show, he had yet to make his full-blown feature debut. The first steps began in 1979 when Michael Uslan secured the rights and crafted a screenplay that he returned him to his grim and gritty roots. However, he had a hard time getting any studio to make it, as the memory of the Adam West Batman show still lingered, apparently unaware of his serious turn into comic books. Finally, in 1981, he signed with Warner Brothers and producers Peter Gerber and John Peters, but as a result, he was quickly sidelined by them. They hired Tom Mankiewicz of Superman fame to rewrite the script, making it more comic. They didn't set out to find a director, trying everyone from Joe Dante to Richard Donner, who was interested but too busy making Lady Hawk, and he ended up stealing Mankiewicz back for his own movie. Finally, they found Tim Burton, if only to help further develop the script, but later got him the directing job as well. He added the Joker killing Bruce Wayne's parents, while paring down the origin story, and having the story start when Batman's already in full force. Gruber and Peters then hired Sam Hamm to give a pass to the script, who was inspired by The Dark Knight Returns, something that made them realize that Batman can be dark and serious, while adding the characters of mob boss Carl Grissom and love interest Vicky Vale. Throughout it all, the Joker was always meant to be the villain, and only one person was everyone's choice, including Bob Kane's, and that was Jack Nicholson. However, the Oscar-winning legend would not come cheap, and he signed on for $6 million up front and a percentage of the gross in merchandise. It would prove to be a brilliant deal. With all that in place, all that was required was, cast Batman. Of all the actors, Michael Keaton was cast, something that the fans and both Michael Uslan and Bob Kane hated, going so far as to criticize his lack of a strong chin, since that would be the most prominent feature when he wears the costume. Kane was quickly mollified, however, when he was hired as a consultant on the film, and then went on to work consoling fans about Keaton, along with getting extra money on the side with portraits of Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson, which were probably ghost painted. The man knew how to make a buck. Finally, Warren Sharon was brought on to do a final polish of the script, in which he let Vicky Vale live, but added a controversial scene in which Alfred led her into the Batcave, along with further emphasizing Joker killing Wayne's parents. Production went smoothly, and then a trailer was released to help build anticipation. It worked even better than expected, not only turning the fan base around, but even reports of people just buying tickets just to see the trailer alone. All of this was part of Warner Brothers' $10 million marketing campaign, along with 300 licensed products tied into the movie. WB also hired Prince, the pop star, to originally do the soundtrack score, but that job eventually went to Danny Elfman, who created a then iconic score that is almost equal to John Williams' work on Superman. Prince did craft a now infamous album that nevertheless went multi-platinum and generated $6 million in sales. Finally, Batman premiered on June 28, 1989, doubling the opening box office gross record at $40.49 million. It will then become the first film to pass $100 million in 10 days and go on to gross $441 million worldwide, $887 million in today's dollars. It also led to Jack Nicholson receiving a record-breaking payday as well, as his gross percentage amounted to $60 to $90 million take. Take that, Marlon Brando. However, the critical response was mixed, even among the fans who hated the Joker being made the Wayne's killers, though Nicholson's performance was universally praised. And the fact that he was killed throughout the fact that Batman killed throughout the film, something that didn't even happen in The Dark Knight Returns, despite what director Zack Snyder claims. However, Keaton proved to be an able Batman, Bruce Wayne, and Burton's atmosphere's direction made for an enjoyable film. The set designs and costumes were particularly notable, with many arguing to this day that Keaton's Batman costume is the best version to date, while the Batmobile and Batwing became instantly iconic. When the Batwing flies up and is silhouetted against a full moon, it caused more than a few fan-induced seizures. Plus, when the film was released on VHS later that year, it would gross $150 million by itself. I still remember the shock I got when I was a kid getting my copy for Christmas, which just added on to $1.2 billion Warner Bros. Made of licensing and merchandise. In many ways, Batman was the realization of Jeanette Kahn's original plan for DC gone even further. Now the gross for box office wasn't just factoring in the film's success, but also merchandising and licensing. It was a whole new expansion of the term blockbuster, and Batman was in the middle of it. And I think I'm going to stop there for now. I like to keep these episodes around a half hour if I can, because I can't imagine anyone listening to me talk longer than that. When we return, we will, of course, get to the immediate sequel of the Batman movie, Batman Returns, along with seeing how the comics and other movies evolved as well, including the cartoons, and my favorite version of Batman, the Batman animated series. I do want to make note that my chief source for this episode and the future episodes based on this is The Caped Crusader by Gwen Weldon, a fantastic book that covers the history of Batman and his fandom from the very beginning. Highly recommended. Check it out wherever books are sold. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of the History of Comics podcast, and see you again next time.
My name is Mark McCray, and I'm the author of The Best Saturdays of Our Lives.
I'm Dan Klink, co-host of The Best Saturdays of Our Lives podcast.
The Best Saturdays of Our Lives features programming trends from the 1966 television season all the way through the last hurrah of the early digital age of the 1990s.
On the show, if it's animated, we talk about it.
Order your signed copy today at tbsool.com.
And listen to the podcast at esonetwork.com and all podcast platforms.
And now it is September 26, 2024, time for the favorite comic of the week. Ultimate Spider-Man, number 9, by Jonathan Hickman and Marco Checchetto, which is another great issue that finds Spider-Man and Harry Osborn, the Green Goblin, figuring out new deals with their suits while also having a little bit of a conflict of how to deal with a new supervillain. Meanwhile, MJ meets with Ben Parker and J. Jonah Jameson on how best to run their new successful paper.
This is just another great issue that really starts slowly building the world building up as we start seeing the beginnings of a conflict between Peter and Harry. As Peter doesn't feel like it's right to kill supervillains, but Harry has no problem doing it, especially with the new one that eventually shows up. And also you get hints that Peter may be a little bit afraid of these suits, and he kind of gets a more classic look. Meanwhile, MJ is fantastic to look at. Where you finally get that. It's great to see a dynamic and intelligent MJ who's sorely missing from the 616 comics, which is why this one big reason why Ultimate Spider-Man sells so well, because hey, you get a great MJ in this on top of everything else. And seeing her work with J. Jonah Jameson and Ben Parker is a true highlight of this book. And it's all matched by Kaketo's art, which is gorgeous, great depictions of all the characters. Once again, MJ never looked more gorgeous than ever. Some great action, especially when the new villain shows up. All in all, this is the best Spider-Man comic still on the stands, bar none, because you have everything you want. Spider-Man and MJ together in a happy relationship. They got kids, they have cool villains, great stories, beautiful art. This is the Spider-Man book to read. And with that, well, since I'm bringing up the archives for the history of Batman because, Batman Day was this last weekend, so in celebration of the Dark Knight, I'm going to dust off these old archives. Just got back from vacation, had a lot of great fun. Maybe give some updates on that, but if you really want to get the real updates, check out the Fall Horseman YouTube channel. Fantastic group of friends there, and they do a great. If you want to know about shopping, horror movies, stuff like that, check out the Fall Horseman on YouTube. Great fun, and you might catch a certain history of comic books guy, see what I look like, and you realize I have a face fit for podcasting. I don't have a voice for podcasting either, but what are you gonna do? I enjoy it too much. But with that, go out and enjoy some good comic book, and once again, check out Ultimate Spider-Man. That's the Spider-Man book we've all been waiting for.